G'day, welcome to Bradley's Bakehouse, where today we're making every baker's favourite festive treat, a panettone. Panettone is like a sweet, yeasted Italian cake sort of thing. It's usually full of like candied fruit and like delicious like slivers of sweet nuts and stuff like that. It's like everything that I wanted a Christmas pudding to be when I was younger. Because like, I've always felt that traditional Christmas puddings are just kind of shit. So we're gonna divide this up into 2 days because this is a pretty involved process, I won't lie. This is a little bit of an Olympic sport. So let's crack on with day one. Okay, so the two things that we have to take care of on day one is that we need to make our sponge. A sponge is a kind of levain that's often used in like sort of sweeter things like that. And for that, we've got some of Lighthouse's bread and pizza flour. We've got a little bit of my sourdough culture. It's very ripe. It was fed probably about 14 hours ago. It's ready to rumble, and we've got some milk. The second thing that we need to do is prepare our fruit. So I've got about 150 grams of like a dried fruit medley. I know this one has sultanas, currants, it's got little bits of peach in it. I believe it's got some apple in there as well. And we need a liqueur to sort of soak them and condition them in overnight. Traditionally, I believe brandy is usually the go. I'm gonna use spiced rum because that's what I've got a bottle of. And I'm also gonna spike it with a little bit of vanilla extract and some like freshly squeezed orange juice. So the first thing that we're gonna do is set up our sponge. Setting up a sponge is very similar to like a sourdough feeding routine. We're going to use some sourdough culture, some like fresh, higher protein bread flour, and instead of water, we're gonna use milk. It seems kind of gross, but they've been doing it for long enough that I trust them at this point. So first into this bowl, I'm gonna pour my milk. The exact ratios for everything are available in the description, by the way, if that's a thing that you're chasing. And in goes our levain. So this is my like very ripe, stiff sourdough starter. It's about 60% hydration. That's where I usually keep it at. It has never let me down, it has never failed me, so it would really suck if it were to do that now. I'm gonna get that straight into the milk. I know that's a weird thing to say. That's what we're doing. We're getting that in the milk. The cursed White Russian over here. It just doesn't seem very appetizing, but from this unlikely place, something beautiful will come, I promise. And then we're gonna add our bread flour. And like I said, it's very similar to a sourdough feeding routine. We just need to make this homogeneous and singular. The interesting thing comes from the fact that we're using milk, right? Milk is not famous for having a long shelf life. See how quickly that came together? It's almost got the same sort of consistency as Poolish, which is a weird thing for me to say, considering I haven't done a Poolish episode yet. I'll do a Poolish episode soon. By the way, I think this technically qualifies for a Christmas episode. Like if we're doing a panettone, and it's gonna come out in December probably, I think this is a Christmas episode. This guy's gonna sit out at room temperature for about 3 or 4 hours until it gets nice and like foamy and active, and then it's gonna do the rest of its maturing time is gonna spend in the fridge at like a cold temperature that milk can safely hang out at. So we're gonna leave this, we'll check back in 4 or so hours, and we'll see how it's going, and then we'll throw it in the fridge to do its like final bit of maturing. Okay, so the second thing that we need to do today is get our fruit conditioning. So we've got our little dried fruit medley here, and this is just a jar. I think this had pickles in it at some stage. Now, I believe in the recipe it says I need 205 grams of this fruit, like this conditioned fruit thing, and I'm pretty sure I weighed up 180 grams of fruit just before. Like I always say, please invest in a decent scale. You'll make all of this sort of shit way easier on yourself, and you'll have a much better time, and you'll get a better quality product. So the first thing we're gonna do is throw in just like a glug of rum. This is Sailor Jerry's spiced. I've always been a Sailor Jerry's man. The scale's currently reading 179.6. We wanna get this to 205. So we're gonna just throw in a glug of rum. That was a pretty aggressive glug of rum, if I do say so myself. We might be going a touch over. This is vanilla extract, just a little dribble of that. Tiny touch more. Cool. And then this is a single fresh navel orange. Just gonna get the fresh juice from this orange today. And we're gonna finish off that last 5 or so grams with orange juice. Cool. That's our fruit in its conditioning solution. What's gonna happen overnight is that this dried fruit is gonna soak up all this nice, very like flavorful liquid. Like, if it's the opposite to the sponge, if you smell this smells incredible. So we're just gonna shake that up, give that a nice little thing. That's just gonna sit at room temperature overnight, and that's just gonna soak up all that fruit and become so lovely, and like they're gonna be like little flavor bombs inside of our panettone. Okay, so it's been about 4 hours and our sponge has taken on a very lacy quality. It started rising and it's sort of like domed a little bit, like a good sourdough culture should. It's very jiggly, actually. Oh my goodness. I had no idea how jiggly it was. That's gonna get covered up and put in the fridge overnight. It's gonna finish its rising in there. And then tomorrow when I go to make my dough, I'll take it out of the fridge to take the chill off it about an hour before I start mixing things up. And we'll go from there. Our fruit, on the other hand, is gonna stay out at room temperature overnight. It's already puffed up quite a bit and taken on just about all of that liquid. It's getting good and drunk, if you know what I mean. Hello and welcome to day 2 of my panettone parade. So our sponge has been made and it's fermented overnight and it's lovely and lacy and jiggly and strong. Our fruit is so drunk it's getting kicked out of bars, but we get to make the dough today. We get to make the dough and that means we need flour, yeast, we've got some butter that we've softened at room temperature, we need an egg, we've got salt, sugar, water, and I'm gonna use pecans today. Traditionally, I believe it's supposed to use almonds, but I've got pecans, I don't have almonds. We're gonna use pecans today. So let's get the stand mixer out and let's make this dough. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do is set our dough up to do a quick 20-minute fermentation. So I've got the paddle attachment on my stand mixer, and into that, the only thing that I'm gonna put in is my flour, my yeast, all of that beautiful ripe sponge. That smells incredibly ripe. My water. There we go. I wonder how many people have cracked an egg on a Kenwood. Sounds like something like along the lines of shrimp on the, like chuck another shrimp on the barbie, crack another egg on the Kenwood. So we're just gonna mix that for about a minute on a slow speed until like kind of a little bit of a shaggy mass forms. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna pop this up and we're gonna get it off the paddle. We don't need the paddle attachment anymore. We're gonna cover our dough with a plate and we're gonna leave this to do what's called a fermentation for 20 minutes. Now what that's gonna do is it's going to allow our flour to hydrate, and through some like vaguely complicated chemical business, it's going to start creating our gluten matrix. And of course we need a gluten matrix because that's gonna form like the net that catches all of the gas that our lovely sourdough sponge and our yeast is gonna produce, which is gonna make the panettone light and bubbly and airy and delicious. So we're gonna do absolutely nothing to this for 20 minutes and then we're gonna finish making our dough. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes. And our dough has got a nice little bit of stretch to it. That fermentation has done its job. So in's gonna go some of our butter. I'm only gonna put about half of it in though. This is room temperature butter. It's definitely not fridge cold. And in is also gonna go our salt and our sugar. We're gonna put our dough hook in. And we're gonna start mixing this on slow just until everything is like combined, and then we're gonna bring it up to about a medium speed for about 2 minutes, and then we're gonna gradually add in the rest of our butter. Okay, so all of our butter is now like incorporated into it. We're gonna give this a pretty hard time in the bowl. We're gonna knead it at that speed for probably about another 6 minutes. And then we're gonna see about putting our like fruit and the nuts in. So now that our gluten is nice and developed and nice and stretchy, oh goodness, look how stretchy that is, and smooth and supple. Anyway, now that our gluten is nice and developed, we're gonna add in our extra things. So our drunken fruit, I'm gonna keep calling it that by the way, I think it's funny. We're gonna add that in now. And we're also gonna add in our pecans. I've just crushed these up a little bit, just so they're not all whole. I did a bad job because I mixed a bunch of them. These are gonna go in now. Now, it's really important that you establish your gluten before you mix something like fruit in. We need to mix the fruit in very slowly and very gently. If you do it fast, you can actually rupture the fruit, and the acid in there will have a really negative impact on your yeast or whatever leavening you're using. So get your gluten nice and developed first, and then we're just gonna set this on the slower speed and just let it go for about 2 or 3 minutes until that fruit and those nuts are nicely dispersed. Okay, so a couple minutes of mixing later, our fruit and nuts are all inside this lovely jeweled dough that we've got here. You shouldn't overload a panettone. The bits inside it, they should be like little treasures. So this is just a plastic container. We're gonna bulk ferment our panettone for about 2 hours. I've just got a lightly wetted hand here. Just makes it easier to scoop this whole thing out. And it's just gonna come very easily. This dough in particular is relatively forgiving to handle at this stage. Just gonna give it a very like light round, and we're just gonna put it in there. I have put a little bit of like spray oil in the bottom of the container just to stop it from sticking. So we're gonna let this sit for about an hour, and then we're gonna come back and do like one strength building fold, Then we're gonna let it sit for another hour and then we're gonna shape it. I'm gonna seal this one up and I will see you in an hour. Okay, so it's been about an hour into this bulk ferment and our panettone is starting to rise very beautifully. We're now gonna give it its one strength building fold. We're just gonna wet our hands really quick. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab each side, see how we can kind of make it resemble a square. We're going to grab each side of our square, tug it up and stretch it out. Ooh, that's a lot of air in that. And then fold it towards the center. Then we're gonna turn 90 degrees and we're gonna repeat that all the way around. There we go. Then, just gonna gently pick her up and sort of re-bool it as best we can. Not doing too much, not too much hands-on stuff. And then we're just gonna pop it back down. So that has a couple of points. One, it's gonna redistribute the yeast's food source. So it's gonna allow that yeast to keep eating nice and voraciously and keep producing the gas that we want and keep fermentation going. It's also going to realign the gluten matrix to further strengthen it. So it's a really important step in a bulk ferment like this. We're gonna give that another hour to bulk ferment and then we're going to turn it out, shape it, and get it ready for proofing. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours. We've done our one stretch and fold, and this is coming along really nicely. I'm really happy with how much it's risen. We're ready to get this out and pre-shape it. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a very light amount of plain flour just on the bench here. This dough, because it's nice and enriched, it's not gonna be that sticky or anything. It's kind of more of a precautionary sort of measure. And so that's just gonna slide right out. Right out it is, there we go. Down we are. You might need to be a weirdo like me and really like the smell of stuff fermenting, but like this and the rum and the fruit and the orange, it just, when I started making these for Christmas, that very quickly became like the smell of Christmas for me. I love it. I'm gonna pre-shape this very similarly to how I pre-shaped like any of the longer ferment things. I'm just gonna tuck all 4 corners in. Ooh, it's nice and gassy. It's nice and gassy indeed. Just gonna tuck all 4 corners in. All right, we're just gonna flip that boy over. Sprinkle it with a touch more flour. That's mostly for my hands and not necessarily the dough itself. I'm just gonna use our bench scraper. Just tuck all of that in. Get that nice and tensioned. There we go. That's just gonna sit there covered for about 20 minutes and we're gonna prepare our baking vessel. So traditionally, panettones are baked in like paper molds. They're like single-use paper molds. Put them in there, you prove them in there, you bake them in there, you hang them in there. We'll talk more about that later. I don't have any of those because they're weirdly difficult to get where I live without buying like 100 of them. So I'm gonna use this instead. This is a 5" by 4". What's the real? 15 centimeter by 10 centimeter cake tin. It's just like a tall cake tin. We do need to prepare our vessel with this. And for that, we're gonna need some baking paper. Everyone has their own different method of lining cake tins. I'm not fancy. All I do is I just put this on here. This is just a pocket knife and I just cut it out. Ta-da. I don't wanna fuck around drawing lines on stuff. I don't wanna fuck around with the whole stencil thing. I wanna put it down, I wanna trace around it, and I wanna be fine. Okay, so that's gonna cover the bottom. Traditionally, the panettone papers, if you look at them, you do a quick Google, they have like I think it's called a collar. What I am gonna do is I am gonna line the edges of this with some baking paper as well. So this is just a sheet of baking paper that I cut in half lengthwise. I'm just gonna get some spray oil on the inside of this cake tin to just hold everything down. Perfect. And that is our DIY panettone mold. When I was testing this recipe, I also did it in an 8" cake tin, and it was delicious. It was fantastic even. It was just very squat and very wide, which I thought it was funny in like it's like a Hobbit panettone kind of way. But no, if you want a more traditional shape, they are typically a tall cylinder, not like a wide cake. But also, like, use whatever you have. Like, if you only have an 8" cake tin, use an 8" cake tin. Like, this will still bake up beautifully. It will still be delicious. Any one of your friends or family, I'm sure, would be glad to receive it as a gift. Don't let your equipment stop you from making the things that you want to make. You do not need to source panettone papers or specific panettone molds. Use what you have. If I can impress one lesson on you from this video or from like any of this series, please just try to use what you have. You do not need to go out and buy things. Alrighty, so 20 minutes have passed. This is nice and, ooh, it's nice and rested. So because it's in like a boule shape, all we really need to do is tighten this up. So we're gonna take both of our hands, a little bit of flour on like the blades. I say that a lot, like the blades of our hand. We're just gonna pull that up and we're just gonna increase that surface tension. See? Just like so, hey? Just do that a few times. See how it's tightening up and it's becoming more of like a orb, I would say. It's gonna be one quick motion. This is kind of the downfall of using like this DIY thing, is that we need to get this into there, preferably without fucking our mold. That is the way. That is how it is done. Do not ask me to do that again. Spent fucking 2 days making this. I don't want to make another one right now. Cool, so that's in our mold now. This is gonna proof up. Probably gonna take about 2 hours. I'm definitely not gonna start checking it before 2 hours. I would say 2 hours is probably like a pretty safe bet. And then there's like a few like finishing steps that we've got to do before we bake it. Like I said, this one's a pretty involved process. And there's even some stuff that we got to do after we finish baking it. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours, a little bit over. And as you can see, our panettone has pretty much doubled in size. It's filling up a lot of its mold. I did trim the paper collar back just because it seemed to touch excessive. We're now gonna hit this with a few finishing moves. We've preheated our oven to about 170 degrees Celsius. These get baked generally a little bit lower and slower. We're gonna do a couple things for like oven spring and like aesthetic purposes. So the first thing we're gonna do, this is just some melted butter that I've let come to room temperature and like a really over the top brush. It's just the only clean one that I've got right now. And I'm just gonna really lightly brush the top of this. Every time I say panettone, I like don't know if I should try to do like the Italian, like, oh, we're just gonna brush the top of the panettone, or if I should do like, yeah, we're just gonna brush the top of the fucking panettone. Just go like full Queensland. I don't know. I'm sure someone's gonna let me know in the comments. That's gonna do a couple things. One, it's gonna taste good. Two, it's gonna keep the top nice and moist, and it's gonna really help guarantee like maximum oven spring, you know? It's also gonna give it like a nice shine. Speaking of shine, this is just some regular white sugar. Super traditionally, they would use like these big bits of like pearl sugar. It's really expensive and I don't have any. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this with some white sugar. It's means to an end. It's not super traditional, but I have a feeling it's gonna lend some nice sort of like texture and taste and stuff. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this like relatively liberally. And the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna give it a very, very, very shallow little cross score on the top. Now this isn't a alarm or anything like that. This is just a regular old steak knife. We're just gonna give it a little, just a very simple like cross score, so. Just very shallow. Not particularly deep at all, but a little bit longer than that. And that is ready for the oven. So like I said, I've got our oven preheated to about 170 degrees. This is probably gonna bake for about an hour, but we're gonna start checking it around the 35-40 minute mark, just to see how it's like browning and stuff. But yeah, this is a long, like low, slow bake. Okay, so it's been about an hour and we're gonna take our panettone out of the oven. It's nicely browned, the top's nice and shiny, it's sprung a bit. There's that little bit of texture from where I put the sugar on. Ooh, have a look at that. Now, there is one final stage of the panettone making process, and then I swear to God, we're done. So traditionally, these would be in their paper molds, they would have something either hook onto the bottom or like skewered through them, and then they would be hung to cool completely upside down. And what that does is it allows it to, you know, it'll extend like a little bit further, it'll keep the crumb nice and open, and it'll stop it from like collapsing on itself. Obviously, I can't put a skewer through this because it's in a cake tin. Nah. So we're gonna have to figure out a different method. I've got something, it's a little bit bootleg, but just go with me on this. So this is probably like a third of Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. Good Omens is here too. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn our panettone out very gently. Very, very gently. And thanks to that collar and thanks to that paper, this should come out fairly easily. Oh heavens. Oh goodness gracious. These are two just like bamboo skewers that you'd use for like kebabs or whatever. And one of them is just gonna go through on the right side, like so, straight through. And the other one is just gonna go through on the left side, like that. Then, just gonna bring these two together And we are just going to very, very delicately invert our panettone. And there we have it. That is gonna cool completely upside down. In a couple of hours, we'll be able to slice it open and see how we did. I must say it looks gorgeous. It looks lovely. It's just like a nice little gentlemanly panettone. You know, it's not this big fucking, it's just this nice, delicate little boy, and it smells incredible. I can't understate how good it smells in the room right now. So, our panettone has been hanging for a few hours. It's nice and cool. I can feel that it's like the opposite of collapsed on itself. Gonna pull our skewers out now. As I said, the panettone is a bit of an Olympic sport of a thing to make. A lot of prep goes into it. There's a lot of care, a lot of love goes into something like this. But I think after about 48 hours or so, we are finally ready to cut into this. So let's see how we did. Oh goodness. Have a squiz at that. Hey? Look at that. Oh my god. Nice like irregular holes. It's open, but it's not like crazy open. That was really delicious, that bit that I just ate. I'm really happy with that. I think that is something to be quite proud of there. Shall we try a piece? I'm gonna try a piece. The first piece of the panettone. Oh, that's delicious. Genuinely wonderful. Like it's like almost like a childlike joy, you know? Like the really like rummy, vanilla-y, orangey fruit, the nice crunchy pecans, like that little bit of like sweetness from the sugar on top, just like that long, slow fermentation, that like nice, like sourdoughy, like depth. These things are delicious. This might not be the like prettiest, like Instagram-y panettone ever. The recipe's reliable as hell. It makes like a nice small one. You got like a nice little gathering. Everyone's gonna be like elated. They're gonna love it, and they're gonna love you. When you invest in panettone, you invest in your friends. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this. Panettone can seem really intimidating on the surface, and that's because it is, but also the internet's kind of making it that way. Making a humble little like home-style panettone doesn't need to be the hardest thing in the world, and you do need to put like a little bit of care and a little bit of attention into it, but you can end up with something that is incredibly delicious and anybody would be so thankful to receive. On another note, this is like the end of the first season of whatever this show that I'm making is. Thank you very much for watching. If you've been watching, like if you jumped on board and you watched more than one episode and you somehow ended up here, I really appreciate that. I'm learning along with the rest of you, and it's been an excellent journey, and doing this show has kind of revitalized a little bit of my like love for coming up with recipes and my, you know, desire to like share what I know and have people share what they know with me. Hope you stick around. There's a bunch of new recipes written for like the next season, and I think it's gonna be really good. So thank you for watching Bradley's Bakehouse. Have a happy holidays.